In 1930, a dentist named Weston Price had a question that nobody in his profession was asking. His waiting room was full of patients with crooked teeth, crowded jaws, and mouths that seemed too small for the teeth trying to fit inside. He was treating the symptoms every day, but the cause, the reason this was happening at all, nobody could adequately explain. Genetics, they said. Bad luck. Just how modern humans were built. Price did not believe it, so he left his practice and spent the next decade traveling to the most remote populations on Earth, to Swiss villages untouched by modern food, African tribes, Pacific Islanders, and indigenous communities in Canada, Peru, and the Australian outback. He brought a camera, he brought measurement tools, and he brought the most important thing a scientist can bring to a question: the willingness to accept an answer he did not expect. What he found in the photographs shocked him. In population after population, across 14 countries and every continent, across cultures with nothing in common, except the absence of modern processed food, he found the same thing. Perfectly straight teeth, wide, well-formed jaws, not a single case of the dental crowding that had filled his waiting room back in Cleveland. When he looked at the ancient skulls his colleagues had collected, the numbers became almost impossible to dismiss. A researcher named Palmer studied 600 prehistoric skulls from India and from Native American populations. 98% showed no occlusion defects. None. Not a single crooked tooth. And let's be honest, Price's methodology had limitations. His critics noted he lacked proper control groups, and his conclusions went further than his data strictly supported. Those criticisms are fair. But the observation itself, that populations eating traditional food had dramatically better dental alignment than populations eating modern food, has since been confirmed by researchers using far more rigorous methods. Something was protecting their teeth, not genetics, not luck. Just 5 specific things that ancestral populations did, things the modern world quietly stopped doing without anyone noticing what was being given up. If this is the kind of forgotten knowledge you come here for, subscribe before we go further, because what comes next is the part most dentists will never tell you. Let us start with what made Price's observations so uncomfortable. He did not just photograph isolated traditional populations and note their perfect teeth. He photographed the same populations, the same families, the same genetic heritage at the moment of transition. Children raised on traditional food had wide jaws and straight teeth. Their siblings, raised on the same tribal land but eating the modern foods introduced by traders such as white flour, white sugar, and refined vegetable oils, showed the same crowding and narrowing Price had been treating in Cleveland. Same genetics, same environment, different food, different outcome within one generation. A National Geographic investigation published in 2025 confirmed what researchers had been building toward for decades. Ancient human skulls had larger, more forward-developed jaws built for tough, demanding food. As agriculture and then industrialization replaced tough, fibrous food with soft, processed alternatives, mandibles shrank, visible in the fossil record across populations worldwide. The researchers were precise about the mechanism. Less chewing meant less mechanical strain on the jaw, and bone builds in direct response to the demands placed on it. Reduce the demand, reduce the growth. The result, according to Myra Laird, assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania School of Dental Medicine, was a jaw too small to accommodate the teeth trying to fit inside it. The crowding modern orthodontists treat every day is not a genetic inevitability. It is, in large part, the measurable consequence of a dental environment that started changing about 100 years ago. But the change in food hardness was only one part of the picture. Researchers who studied ancestral populations found 4 other habits, each one ordinary, each one invisible, inside the daily life of a traditional community that were quietly shaping jaw development, and modern life has almost entirely eliminated them. The first one starts at birth. The research behind it is more specific than most people have ever heard. The first habit was breastfeeding. Not for a few months, for as long as the child needed it, typically well beyond 6 months, and often into the second year of life. Here is why this mattered for dental development in a way that goes far beyond nutrition. When a baby breastfeeds, the act of drawing milk from the breast is mechanically demanding. The infant has to advance the lower jaw, work the tongue against the breast in an upward and outward motion, and engage the full set of facial muscles in a way that bottle feeding simply does not require. A 2015 systematic review and meta-analysis published in Acta Pediatrica, covering over 27,000 participants across 48 studies, found that children who were never breastfed were significantly more likely to develop malocclusions than those who were. Children breastfed for under 6 months had nearly 4 times the risk of posterior crossbite compared to those breastfed for over 12 months. The reason is mechanical. Breastfeeding places what researchers now call orthopedic forces on the developing jaw, forces that stimulate forward and outward growth of the mandible and the palate. Remove those forces and the jaw develops differently. The bottle, with its passive flow of milk requiring far less muscular work, does not produce the same stimulus. And a PMC study examining medieval craniums found precisely what the breastfeeding research would predict. 600 prehistoric skulls were studied, back when breastfeeding was the only option available. 98% showed no occlusion defects, but breastfeeding alone was not sufficient, because what happened after weaning, what the child was asked to chew for the rest of its childhood, mattered just as much. The second habit was eating food that required real chewing. Raw vegetables, whole grains, meat off the bone, foods with resistance, with fiber, with texture that demanded the jaw muscles actually work. Research published in Science Direct compared primates raised on hard diets with those raised on soft diets. Animals fed harder food developed wider, taller faces with better formed dental arches. Those raised on softer food developed narrowed maxillary arches, rotated teeth, and crowded premolars. A PMC study on dietary consistency confirmed that soft diets suppress condylar cartilage growth in the mandible, the mechanism through which the jaw grows forward and downward to create space for the teeth. The jaw, like every bone in the body, grows in response to the demands placed on it. Give it nothing to work against, and it develops to the minimum necessary. Give it food that requires sustained effort, and it grows to accommodate the full genetic potential of the individual. Ancestral children had no alternative but to chew hard food. Modern children are largely eating a diet that dissolves with minimal jaw engagement. Soft bread, processed snacks, and yogurt pouches. The consequence, across populations, is exactly what the research predicts. 2 habits, both products of the environment rather than deliberate design. Both confirmed by multiple peer-reviewed studies to directly shape jaw development. But the 3 that remain are the ones most people have never connected to their teeth at all. The third habit was bilateral chewing, using both sides of the mouth equally and consistently throughout childhood. This sounds trivial, but it is not. When a child chews predominantly on one side, either from habit, from pain on the other side, or from the unconscious preference that develops when teeth are already slightly misaligned, the muscular development of the jaw becomes asymmetric. One side grows, the other does not receive the same stimulus. Research has confirmed this creates measurable asymmetry in the dental arch and in the facial structure itself. Ancestral populations eating whole, tough foods chewed bilaterally because the food required it. Both sides needed to work to process a piece of dried meat or a raw root vegetable. The modern soft diet, which can be managed with one side without difficulty, removes that requirement. The fourth habit was the absence of pacifiers. This is the one where the research is most direct and the numbers are most specific. A PubMed Central study published in 2024 found that prolonged pacifier use beyond 36 months was associated with the development of anterior open bite, a condition where the front teeth do not meet when the mouth is closed. A separate study found that children using pacifiers for more than 2 years had a higher likelihood of developing crossbite, and that prolonged use led to a statistically significant decrease in palatal depth, meaning a higher, narrower palate with less room for the teeth. The same study found a direct linear relationship. The shorter the breastfeeding duration, the longer the pacifier use. Breastfeeding and pacifier avoidance were not independent habits. They were connected. One protected against the conditions that led to the other. Ancestral children were never given pacifiers because pacifiers did not exist. The sucking need was met by the breast. The jaw developed accordingly. The fifth habit is the one most people overlook entirely, and the one that connects everything else. Ancestral humans breathed through their nose. They did not do it as a deliberate practice. Their airways were clear, their posture was upright, and there was no reason to do otherwise. Here is what nasal breathing does for jaw development, that mouth breathing does not. When the lips are closed and the tongue rests naturally against the roof of the mouth, it acts as an internal scaffold, applying gentle outward pressure against the palate and supporting its development in a wide forward direction. Open the mouth habitually, drop the tongue to the floor of the mouth, and that scaffold disappears. Research has linked chronic mouth breathing in children to narrower palates, more vertical facial growth, and increased rates of dental crowding. Studies in monkeys found that artificially inducing mouth breathing led to narrow palates and crooked teeth. The palate develops in the direction of the forces applied to it from inside and outside. Change those forces, and the development changes. Modern children have higher rates of mouth breathing than at any point in recorded history, driven by allergies, enlarged tonsils, poor posture from screens, and the simple fact that no one told them to close their mouths. Ancestral children breathed through their noses because their bodies were in the conditions they were built for. 5 habits, all of them ordinary, all of them the product of environments and diets that have since been replaced, and all of them confirmed by peer-reviewed research to directly influence the development of the jaw, the palate, and the alignment of the teeth. Most of what Price observed cannot be replicated after adulthood. The jaw develops during childhood, and the window for influencing that development is largely closed by the time the permanent teeth have come in. This video is not a promise that adults can reshape their dental structure through diet alone. The research does not support that claim, and neither does common sense. But for parents, the picture the research paints is worth clear understanding. Breastfeeding, extended where possible beyond 6 months, provides orthopedic forces on the developing jaw that bottle feeding does not replicate. Introducing hard fibrous foods, raw vegetables, whole fruit, and meat that requires chewing as soon as the child is ready gives the jaw the mechanical stimulus it needs to grow to its full potential. Encouraging bilateral chewing. Rather than letting a one-sided habit develop, removes a cause of asymmetry that is almost entirely preventable. Limiting pacifier use and removing it before the palate and arch have been significantly altered. Reduces the risk of the specific malocclusions associated with prolonged non-nutritive sucking. And addressing mouth breathing, whether through treating underlying allergies, improving posture, or simply reminding a child to close their mouth, helps maintain the internal scaffolding that supports palate width. None of these require products. None of them require a dental clinic. They are what ancestral populations did by default, because their environment gave them no alternative. Price went looking for the cause of crooked teeth in Cleveland, and he found it in the gap between the environment human jaws evolved for and the environment modern children are actually growing up in. That gap is real. The research confirms it from multiple directions, and closing even part of it for the next generation starts with understanding what was lost. Subscribe. There is far more where this came from, and most of it has been sitting in the research literature for decades, waiting for someone to connect the dots.